Okay, we're almost getting to where you can count them on one hand. 6 days to go. The polls show a neck-and-neck race between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton as both campaigns hit the trail hard, focusing not only on the battlegrounds, but on putting some traditionally blue and red states into play on Election Day. Good morning to you. I'm John Scott.
I like that, John. A one-hand count.
That's
then
right.
We really
That's
know
tomorrow.
We're close. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee.
The race for the White House getting tighter. Its current occupant had some pointed remarks when it comes to men versus women candidates. In addition to that ABC Washington Post poll we just saw, yet another survey shows Clinton and Trump in a dead heat, 44% each in the IBD TIPP tracking poll. It's narrowing in the battlegrounds as well. The pair essentially tied in North Carolina, Clinton 42, Trump 41 in Elon University's poll. President Obama now suggesting sexism is at play here.
When a guy's ambitious and out in the public arena and working hard, that's okay. But when a woman suddenly does it, suddenly you're all like, well, why is she doing that? I'm just being honest. I want you to think about it because she is so much better qualified than the other guy.
So let's talk about it with Charlie Hurt, a columnist with the Washington Times and a Fox News contributor. A.B. Stoddard is an associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics. Welcome, both of you. A.B., take on that sexism charge by the president. At this stage of the campaign, are you surprised that that is what he comes out with?
Yeah, I don't think it's his best talking point. I think it probably is an effort to excite women voters, but I think there are plenty of things you can say to women voters about Donald Trump without saying that Hillary Clinton is being treated differently than any other candidate. Hillary Clinton is being treated differently than the other candidate because she is an ethical dumpster fire and she's a habitual liar. Trump lies more, according to the truth trackers, but I mean, she's being treated this way because she's a disaster as a candidate. So at the same time, I do agree that there's sexism among some Trump voters, which is why Trump has said, listen, fellas, she doesn't look presidential, does she? And then, Pence says things like, he talks about Donald Trump's broad shoulders and his broad-shouldered leadership. And it's definitely a way to wink at the men that don't want her to be commander-in-chief, partially because she's female. Does that mean that the electorate's going to reject her because of sexism? No. But I think that, I think that in these few hours remaining, there are better things in the case to be made for Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump for President Obama to be talking about.
Yeah, Charlie, the president used to come out and say, oh, she's better qualified than anybody who's ever run for president, including me. Now he's saying she's a victim of sexism.
Yeah, and it's funny, I didn't hear him making that talking point in 2008 when he was running against her for the Democratic nomination, but there's no, I mean, he's saying this because he will say anything, and he came in on these promises that he was going to be this unifier, and instead we get all of this divisiveness. But I think what the real thing that this kind of reveals or points up is the fact that I think there is some panic setting in with the Clinton campaign and with Democrats in general. I think they are increasingly getting nervous, not only because the race is as close as it is, but with these things that are coming out from the Comey bombshell and things like that. The race was already closing before that, and I think that they're willing, and what we're going to see in the next couple of days, they're going to throw everything at Donald Trump, and even little things, tactics like this, trying to blame it on sexism.
Yeah, A.B., let's talk about the state of the race. I mean, again, national polls don't mean all that much because it really is the Electoral College state by state that determines the winner. But in a national poll, these two are tied, 46% each. What is going to be the item that gives one side the edge over the other?
Well, that's a really good question, John. I mean, the race is tied because I think that right in time, at the last minute here, Donald Trump has managed to bring Republicans home. So he's edging closer to that 90% he needs of the Republican vote to win. Hillary Clinton has her base, but she's looking to excite them, to turn out low propensity and low enthusiasm voters on her side who liked Obama more, young people, African-American voters. This is going to be difficult for her. And she also is looking for those Republican defectors who are never going to vote for Trump. The FBI revelations reminded them of how much they can't stand her. She needs to motivate them to vote against Trump instead of just stay home and support her. So you know, in the traditional metrics, John, of the way that we've looked at these election mechanics, it's always going to give you a couple of percentage points if you have the superior ground game. She has more get out the vote excitement with more surrogates in the next couple days in all the right places. Of course, Donald Trump has far fewer. But we don't know that this is a traditional campaign. We don't know that those things are going to work.
She has the get out the vote operation, Charlie, but is that going to be enough? I mean, there are some indications that Trump voters are more enthusiastic. In fact, her enthusiasm levels among her supporters has taken a 7 or 8 point drop since these FBI revelations.
And they weren't all that enthusiastic to begin with, and so that loss is pretty significant. And of course, Donald Trump, for all of his flaws as a political candidate, he has always enjoyed enormous enthusiasm. And I do think that that's what it is going to. It's going to be a battle between the sort of political operation that, obviously, as you point out, and as AB says, that Hillary Clinton has on the ground in these last days. That versus this sort of national campaign, this enthusiasm, and then, of course, the sort of head games that Donald Trump is the master of. And in that clip you just played where he's talking about people, you can still go back and change your vote. Yeah. It's a very smart way of not only trying to get people to do something like that, but also warning people, well, if you do vote for her, you're going to wind up regretting it.
All right.
And we'll see if those things can outmatch the machine.
Charlie Hurt, Washington Times, A.B. Stoddard, Real Clear Politics. Thank you.
Well, a new WikiLeaks release this morning raising some new questions about the Clinton email investigation, specifically the friendship between Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, and a top Justice Department official. Blake Berman from the Fox Business Network joins us live from Washington with more. Blake?
Hi there, Jenna, and good morning to you. Peter Kadzik is the one reemerging once again in the latest WikiLeaks document dump, raising more questions about the firewall between the Justice Department and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Kadzik is an assistant attorney general at the DOJ. He's the one in charge of basically managing the department's relationship with Congress. Well, in the latest WikiLeaks email, it's dated from May 2015, Kadzik emails Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta with the title, "Heads Up." And Kadzik follows by writing this, quoting here. He says, "There is an oversight hearing today where the head of our civil division will testify, likely to get questions on State Department emails." Additionally, that email was sent to Podesta by Kadzik on his private Gmail account and not on an official government account. You might remember Podesta, in another recently released email, had described Kadzik as a fantastic lawyer and said Kadzik, quoting Podesta here, "kept me out of jail." Separately today, as Obamacare comes front and center on the campaign trail, we're also getting a look at how top aides advised Clinton on the so-called Cadillac tax, which is supposed to provide a tax upon higher premium health plans starting a couple years from now. Well, the email appears to show Clinton went against the advice of her inner circle to stick with her 2008 plan, backing that tax on the wealthiest. 4 days later, she sided with Bernie Sanders and the unions who had called for a full repeal. Jenna, back to you.
Blake, thank you.
Thanks.
It is a key voting block in this election, how advocates are inspiring Latinos to vote in one of America's fastest growing states. Also, we want to hear from you. Do you think the country will unite behind whomever wins the White House next week? Our live chat is up and running. Go to foxnews.com/happeningnow to join the conversation.
As we mentioned, the campaigns are on the road today. Mike Pence and Hillary Clinton are actually both holding events in the swing state of Arizona today, with both campaigns working overtime to get out the all-important Latino vote. William Lajeunesse is live in Tucson with the very latest for us now. William?
Well, Jenna, about half the vote is already in because of early voting sites like this one. Now, a Democrat has only won Arizona once in the last 64 years, but right now the race is essentially tied because of a massive drive for Democrats for Latino voters.
So let me give you this first.
Eugene Bezerra represents America's sleeping giant, the millions of eligible but until now unregistered Latino voters.
You want to be Republican, Democrat, or other? It's up to you.
By combing through neighborhoods like this one in South Phoenix, Latino advocates registered 154,000 new Latino voters.
Oh, qué bueno. Ya lo mandó.
A 25% increase, and that is dramatically changing the state electorate. We've already registered you vote. Now it's the phone call, it's the email, it's the text message.
That's correct.
A record 500,000 Arizona Latinos could vote in this election. That's 20% of voters, up from 6% in 2008.
For us, we're at a tipping point that came a lot earlier than we expected because of all of those people that were out there on the ground.
This is not about being a red state or a blue state. This is about standing up and fighting back for our families.
Up to 40% of Latinos register as independents, but most vote Democratic. Analysts predict 70% will vote, a number nearly equal to whites.
Latino voters do turn out at a pretty good pace. What you're asking is if they tend to turn out at an even greater pace, would it make a difference? And the answer is absolutely.
Now, do you feel like you actually might show up on election day?
Well, I have to. You know, I mean, people, my family are talking to me.
Now, Clinton recently dumped $2 million into Arizona for the 11 electoral votes here. Also, there's a ballot prop on marijuana that's younger voters, on minimum wage that's union support. But, Jenna, that voter you met, Eugene, he registered Republican, even though he said his family would disown him. Back to you.
William, thank you.
New developments in a major battle over a controversial pipeline in one state and what President Obama might do to ease a tense standoff with protesters there. Plus, Donald Trump making a play for Pennsylvania, putting the Clinton campaign on the defense with just 6 days left. Lots of Republicans have tried it, but can Donald Trump flip the Keystone State?
Here in Pennsylvania, premiums are going to increase more than 60%. And that's nothing compared to what will happen in the future. Of course, in the future, if I'm president, there won't be Obamacare, so you won't have to worry about that. I'm not a politician. My only special interest is you, the American people. That's why I've done it.
Well, Donald Trump making a big push in Pennsylvania yesterday, staying on message, hitting Hillary Clinton hard on care and her recent email problems as well. He's also spending big and forcing the top Clinton-backed super PAC to launch a new ad buy in that state. As the Real Clear Politics average shows, Clinton with a 6-point advantage over Trump in the Keystone State. Let's talk about this state with somebody who knows it well. Tom Fitzgerald, national political reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Tom, it's great to have you on the program. There's the polls and us looking from the outside in, but you're there on the ground. What's your sense of this race?
Great to be here, Jenna. Thanks. My sense is it's tightening a bit in the last week or so. Now, whether that's because of the email, the FBI's revelation that they have more emails to look at from possibly related to Hillary Clinton, or whether it's just sort of a natural tightening that happens when the Republican base is starting to coalesce around Donald Trump. The Trump campaign believes that they are closing the gap with women, especially in the Philadelphia suburbs, where most of these statewide races are decided there. They provide about 20% of the vote, and along with Philadelphia, about a third. So they're bringing Melania Trump in tomorrow to work that area. We're in that period of time, Jenna, when Pennsylvania looks winnable. A lot of times, in every 4 years, it seems there's near the end of the cycle, a week, 2 weeks. It looks like Pennsylvania's winnable.
Well, and it's funny you say that, Tom, because we've heard that on our air as well, that Pennsylvania might be winnable, but then you have campaign strategists who say it always seems winnable to Republicans, and then it
right.
isn't. So let me just play a little sound from an interview that John Scott did yesterday. I want to get your thoughts on it, Tom, in just a moment. Let's play that sound.
Okay. In your view, Joe, is it fruitless for him to be campaigning in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania?
I don't hold much hope for him in Pennsylvania. I think that's been a trap for years for the Republicans. It always looks like it's gettable, and then it just falls away at the end for them.
Tom, what do you think about that?
Well, that's been the pattern, but I suppose this year has taught us that, inferring things might not always work. What we think are the rules have been sort of thrown out the window. But yeah, it is going to be, it was always going to be an uphill battle for any Republican in Pennsylvania. It's the most Democrat-leaning of all of the big swing states. And Mr. Trump has had a particular problem with women. Now, if they're right and that's narrowing, that makes him more competitive. But really what we've had is he's super strong in the rural areas and southwestern Pennsylvania, the center of the state, in the northeast and the northwest. But the Philadelphia suburbs he's been toxic, especially
Tom,
among women.
Let me ask you about another, not only just looking at the Trump campaign, but looking at the Hillary Clinton campaign as well, and
yes.
turnout for specific voting groups that the Democrats have often relied on in the state. I'm talking about African-American voters and also millennials. What does it look like for the Clinton campaign and those specific voting groups that have helped them in the past?
They're worried about diminished enthusiasm. Democrats are worried about that. It's not quite the level it was when President Obama was on the ballot. So, you know, they're very good at targeting, at identifying their votes. Everyone's talked about how great the Democrat analytics game is. So, you know, they're confident publicly, but you know, we'll see. Yeah. It's a cause for concern.
It'll be interesting to see all these groups for all sides. We'll see which parties relying on which group and what actually happens come election night. Tom, great to have you in the program. Thank you very much.
Same here, Jenna. You're welcome. Thank you.
Of course, Donald Trump has the NRA endorsement. It used to be that Pennsylvania had more NRA members per capita than any other state.
No kidding.
Might still be the case. So that's something.
Well, we'll see, right? It looks like reliable sources of support in the past may not be there. So, but that's anyone's guess at this point, and that's what we're all doing.
That's why this race is so fascinating. In the final days of the campaign, Hillary Clinton is buying some ad time in some very unusual states. Why her campaign is spending a lot of money in several blue states. Is it a sign of trouble for the Clinton campaign? Plus, he's accused of gunning down 2 police officers in cold blood. How police caught up with a suspected cop killer and what they're learning about his record. We're live with that update. Back to politics now as the race for the White House enters its final days. Both campaigns are spending time and money in some unusual places, focusing not only on the key battleground states like Florida and North Carolina, but working to even flip the traditional electoral map. Donald Trump campaigning in traditionally blue states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, while Hillary Clinton is trying to pick off the red state of Arizona as she works to shore up Democratic support by airing ads in Virginia, New Mexico, Colorado, and Michigan. Joining us now, Simon Rosenberg, president and founder of NDN and former Bill Clinton campaign advisor. Also with us, Ian Pryor, communications director for American Crossroads. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning, John.
Simon, the Hillary Clinton campaign, for instance, is spending money in my home state of Colorado. It's a place that looked very strong for Hillary Clinton. Are they worried?
I don't think they're worried. I think it would be malpractice if in the final week of the election that the Clinton campaign didn't do everything they could to win in what had been the traditional battleground states. I mean, John, you're aware that as recently as 2004, the Democrats didn't even compete in Colorado, right? I mean, they let it go to the Republicans. So many of these states are battleground states. They've got Republican governors. They've gone the other way in recent elections. This is what you would expect the campaign to be doing at the end. There's no panic here.
On this kind of a campaign, Ian, how effective is television advertising going to be?
Well, that's one of the things we've seen throughout this campaign is that the traditional means of communicating, television ads, has not really done the job. I mean, Hillary Clinton has outspent Donald Trump by millions, and he's still in it. Ultimately, I think what we have here is a game of hot potato. Whichever candidate ends up having the last 10 days of bad media coverage might end up being on the losing end of this thing. And right now, you'd have to say Hillary Clinton is the one with the bad coverage.
Well, what do you think about that hot potato analogy, Simon?
Well, look, it's the final week, right? Everyone's going to spend all of their money. They're going to put all their surrogates out. They're going to do everything they can. That's what the, campaigns are for. I think, look, Democrats feel pretty good about where we are. It's clearly not where we were a few weeks ago. We still have, in many polls, a 3, 4, 5-point lead. We're still ahead in the Electoral College. But we're not going to leave, we're not going to unilaterally disarm here. I mean, we're going to throw everything we can at the end, and I think we're pretty confident of victory next week.
At the same time, Ian, I mean, as you said, Donald Trump has not run a traditional campaign. He has not spent the kind of money, not bought the kind of ads that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats have. Can he pull it out, despite the fact that he doesn't have the resources, the kind of money in the bank that her campaign has?
Well, I think he's still the underdog, but there's no doubt he's closing. I mean, if you look at some of the states you mentioned, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, traditionally blue states, he is closing the gap in those states. And even if he doesn't win Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, that benefit is going to go down ballot. If he loses Wisconsin by, say, 3 points, Ron Johnson's coming back to the Senate. If he loses Pennsylvania by 5 points, Pat Toomey's coming back to the Senate. So there are implications beyond the presidential race for what these traditionally blue states may mean for down ballot races.
Yeah, there is the suggestion, Simon, that Hillary Clinton's campaign is feeling the same kind of heat in places like Colorado, that they want to try to lift down ballot Democrat candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny to hear states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania be described as blue states. I mean, the Pennsylvania congressional delegation is more than 2-to-1 Republican, right? There's a Republican senator, fighting for for re-election. Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, you've got a Republican governor. These are battleground states. I mean, please, guys, come on. I mean, these are traditional battleground states. And what's interesting to me is that the campaign that's expanded the map has been the Democrats. And we now have Arizona leaning towards Hillary Clinton, North Carolina leaning towards Hillary Clinton. Trump will probably end up flipping Iowa and Ohio, right? But so the Democrats have successfully added more states to what's called their blue wall. And I think we're coming out of this, again, feeling good in the final days. We're going to leave everything on the playing field. There's no doubt about it.
Donald Trump has said that there is a silent majority out there, Ian, that there are a lot of people who are ready to vote for him, but maybe just don't talk about it publicly. Is that something he can count on in these last 6 days?
Well, I don't know if you want to necessarily count on that. I mean, it's tough to determine if there is a silent majority out there, if they're not showing up in the polls. But like I said, at this point, I mean, he's got to throw everything out there. He's got to try to get states where, he traditionally couldn't get. Look, even if he gets Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina, he still needs to be able to add states to get to 270. It's a very daunting map for Donald Trump. But the fact that he is still in this thing a week out from the election is amazing, quite frankly.
Ian Pryor from the Republican side, Simon Rosenberg from the Democratic side. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Well, a major lawsuit just days before the election where the NAACP has filed this lawsuit saying what some citizens are doing is illegal under federal law. Our legal panel weighs in next. Some new information on a major lawsuit filed by the NAACP. It was just filed at the beginning of this week, and it's getting a lot of attention. The group claims thousands of voters are being illegally removed from the polls in North Carolina, from voting rolls. The head of the state's chapter says a disproportionate number of those voters are black and calls North Carolina ground zero for voter suppression. Eric Esther is a criminal defense attorney. Richard St. Paul is also a defense attorney, former prosecutor as well. So let's just underscore this because timing matters. And here we are a few days before the election. North Carolina is a tight swing state. Barack Obama won by less than a percentage point in 2008. Mitt Romney won in 2012. So it's very tense. Every vote matters in North Carolina. Richard, you've done some work in the past for the NAACP. Just tell us a little bit about this case and what you see, what stands out most to you.
Sure. So I'm the legal redress for the New Rochelle branch of the NAACP, which is in New York. I've also been the HAVA, Help America Vote Act legal director for West Virginia under the Bush-Cheney campaign. So I've been involved in ballot security for a number of years. Here's what's happening. There's a federal law, the National Voter Registration Act, which requires if you are going to purge your list, it has to be done 90 days before the federal election. The NAACP is claiming that the state of North Carolina is trying to purge their list within that 90 days. So they're saying that they're violating the National Voter Registration Act. North Carolina is saying, hey, we have a state law that allows us to purge people, and so our state law should trump. And I don't think that's correct, because states take money from the federal government and they say we consent to follow that federal law, in this case the National Voter Registration Act. So I think the federal law will trump if in fact there is a violation. Of course, these are all allegations at this point.
Eric, what do you think?
North Carolina has to understand that the federal law trumps any state law, but it is a voter suppression tactic. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, so I'm very accustomed to different ways that different groups try to suppress voters, and intimidation, as well as taking people off the polls, is one of a couple of those tactics. So we have to really pay attention to these lawsuits, because this is just the beginning, Jenna. There are going to be probably hundreds starting Monday and Tuesday, especially after the election really starts. These people are going to file lawsuits. They're going to protest elections. Although we think that the election will be done next week, I think it'll just be the beginning of several big legal battles.
And the NAACP, Richard, says that why they're raising red flag in particular is that the counties most affected are majority black voters in those counties. So you have that as being a central part of the lawsuit. On the other hand, you also have North Carolina being a state where there's been a huge flux of migration. Demographics have changed quite a bit because you have a lot of people moving from the north. Some say North Carolina is less of a southern state and more of a mid-Atlantic state at this time because of the changes over the last several years. So how do you think this works out? Because you do want voting rolls to be accurate. On the same side, you don't want certain groups to be targeted, which is what the NAACP is alleging.
Right. So, look, what happens is that the NAACP is claiming that there's a disparate impact, that it's affecting black voters more than any other voters, whites or Hispanics or others. And that's the allegation. We don't know if that's true or not. Obviously, if North Carolina is not following the law, that's a problem. But on the flip side, when you look at it politically, this is an attempt by the Democratic National Committee and, of course, the Clinton campaign to help turn out black votes because they are sagging behind in black votes. So that's really what it is. So whether or not the allegation is true or not, it's more towards a political play that the Clinton campaign needs help getting a black vote.
Eric, what do you think about that? Do you think that's part of the driver of this?
Oh, Richard, come on, that's a little poppycock. The Republican Party is trying to suppress the vote. Trump has told people we're going to have poll watchers. We're going to watch you go to the polls.
I just want to be clear on this case, though, that the Republican Party isn't the one that's trying to remove people from the ballot. They're individuals, and in the state of North Carolina, it's an individual that said that's an advocate in the area and says we're trying to get this right. So I just want our viewers to be clear about that. Go ahead.
You are totally correct. In reference to this particular lawsuit, you're totally correct. But the overall picture with Trump's things that Trump is saying, telling people they're going to have poll watchers and people are going to watch them go into the polls and possibly intimidate voters, those are the type of suppression tactics that are being utilized and really trying to stifle the African American vote. So that's why I believe, and I'm sure of, next week there are going to be a flood of lawsuits because of voter suppression, and that's going to be one of the major issues.
Richard, just ending with you, because it's my understanding that you're going to be doing some looking at some of the voting. And if you're not on a list and you show up to vote in the state of North Carolina and otherwise, can you still vote?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I was the Help America Vote Act. Under the Help America Vote Act signed by President Bush in 2002, you're entitled to a provisional ballot. Nobody will be denied the right to vote at any polling center because their name is not on the rolls because of the Help America Vote Act signed by Republican President Bush. At the end of the day, these are allegations that need to be proven. And so far, they haven't been proven. I think I saw one person who was 100 years old, and she had a mailing address as a P.O. box. You cannot use a P.O. box as your voter registration address. You can use it to receive mail, but you can't use it to vote. It has to be a physical address to vote. And so that allegation right there is a violation of law. Again, post office boxes cannot be used as a physical address for your voting.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Richard, Eric, we're going to have to leave it there. But I think the underscore, as we continue to look for evidence in this case, I think it's interesting to end on the point that everyone can show up and vote, and we should all do that.
Show up and vote. I'll be out there in Philadelphia trying to protect the vote out.
All right. We look forward to talking to you both again. Eric, Richard, great to have you. Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Thank you. Better, really, than a Game 7 of the World Series? Nothing. Donald Trump is pulling out all the stops in Battleground, Ohio, as the race tightens with just 6 days left. What voters in the Buckeye State are saying. Well, the race for Battleground, Ohio, getting tighter with just 6 days to go. Donald Trump now edging Hillary Clinton by 2.5 points in the Buckeye State, according to the Real Clear Politics average of the polls, as both campaigns pull out all the stops to try to win over those crucial undecided voters. Matt Finn, live in Columbus, Ohio, with the latest. Matt.
Good afternoon, John. Well, we are at the Franklin County Early Voting Center, which is in central Ohio, where 50,000 people have already cast their vote, according to officials. They're averaging about 4,500 early voters a day at this very large location. Now, here in Ohio, both Trump and Clinton are deploying the biggest weapons in their arsenals to campaign here. The president campaigned yesterday for Clinton. He hammered Trump, but avoided mentioning perhaps the biggest threat to Clinton's presidency, the FBI's renewed probe into her email system. Today, Eric Trump will be holding two events in Ohio on behalf of his father. And in these final days, of course, it comes down to ground game. Democrats consider to have a very strong and visible ground game here. Trump not getting so much love. The state's governor, John Kasich, voted for John McCain on Monday. Joining me now is David Payne, the deputy director of Franklin County Board of Elections. David, talk to me about the turnout this year.
Oh, it's been fantastic. As you mentioned, we've had over 50,000 Franklin County voters come here to our early vote center. Another 150,000 have requested absentee ballots by mail. So we're on par with our numbers for 2012. So
very briefly, we're talking about, there's a lot of talk about rigged elections and voter fraud. Talk to me about your triple check system here.
So these machines that you see behind you, they have triple redundancy. They have a hard drive, they have a flash drive, and then they have a paper tape trail. So we take security.
Thank you very much, David. John, I'll throw it back to you in New York.
All right, Matt Finn. Matt, thank you. And we're back in a moment. WikiLeaks drops another batch of Clinton emails today, bringing the total to more than 43,000 with 6 days left until Election Day. Ed Henry has pretty much memorized all 43,000. He's been digging through the latest records. He's live in Washington with more. Ed.
John, good to see you. What's interesting is how much time the Clinton camp has spent talking about Donald Trump and why won't he release his tax returns. And yet we now see from these leaked emails that in 2015, as Hillary Clinton released some tax records, her staff was deeply concerned about the income they'd be revealing, the speech money, and connecting the dots on pay to play. Specifically, they talk in one email about concerns about Bill Clinton. You see him there with his wife, and the fact that he had worked for Laureate, a for-profit college where he served as honorary chancellor and brought in nearly $18 million for that post when it wasn't clear what he was actually doing for the money. Look at this email from Brian Fallon, a spokesman for Clinton, to John Podesta, July 2015. Quote, reporters will also scrutinize the 2013 speech list for overlap between speech hosts and campaign/foundation donors that could fuel pay-to-play storylines. Despite these inevitable angles based on the framing performed in the earlier rounds of stories, we will have given ourselves the best possible fighting chance of promoting the most helpful storylines. You can see how they were worried about pay-for-play while they dismiss it now and say this is just critics bringing it up. And then you see right there Peter Kadzik, a top Justice Department official, and John Podesta. Recent stories about how they're pretty close. Kadzik used to represent John Podesta and now is involved in helping to oversee the Justice Department investigation of Huma Abedin. Well, look at this email from May 2015. Kadzik to Podesta, quote, there's a oversight hearing on the Hill today where the head of our civil division at Justice will testify, likely to get questions on State Department emails involving Clinton, of course. He went on to say there was a new government filing in terms of the State Department producing Clinton emails, and it was going to take a long time to get those emails out. Inside information coming from the Justice Department to Podesta. Here's the interesting part, John. Peter Kadzik didn't use his Justice Department email. Of course, that would go into the official record. Instead, sent it from his Gmail account. Now it's out there because of WikiLeaks, but it shows you maybe some collusion there between the Justice Department and the Clinton camp, the kind of thing that's raising eyebrows right now, John.
And what's the number again that college paid to Bill Clinton? $13 million?
And nearly $18 million.
$18 million.
To be an honorary chancellor. I feel like there's something like that in your future, John. Not soon, but years and years from now, your vast experience and public profile, you are getting that. You are getting that.
People wonder why college is so expensive, and that's part of the reason why. Ed Henry, thank you.
You're right.
I mean, you wouldn't turn it down.
I guess not.
But you're going to say, with this stuff from context. All right, a Fox News alert on some brand new poll numbers suggesting a very tight race, as we've been talking about, as we head to the finish line. Some new CNN ORC polls, specifically looking at 4 battleground states. In Arizona, Trump is now leading Clinton by 4 points there. While in the crucial state of Florida, it's a much tighter race, with Clinton ahead by 2. In Nevada, the new poll shows Trump with a solid 6-point lead, 49 to 43%. Clinton had a 2-point edge there just a few weeks ago. She'll be there later today. And Secretary Clinton is still ahead in Pennsylvania by 4 points in that new poll. Both candidates are now focusing on these critical states as their campaigns wind down. Our next guest is assessing what impact the new Clinton email investigation could have in Washington after the election. Writing, quote, FBI Director James Comey dropped a bombshell onto the home stretch of the 2016 presidential race Friday, and it's hard to know exactly what impact it will have on the race. On the other hand, it's relatively easy to predict what the effect will be on how Washington works after the election, and it won't be good. Here now, Jerry Tsai, Washington Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal. Jerry, it's great to have you back on the program.
Thanks, Jenna.
What was so nice about your piece is that it opened up a bigger picture thinking, not just on the next few days, but what does our government and our country look like after next week? What's your assessment?
Well, look, it's not been a particularly pretty campaign, and I don't think it's necessarily produced a picture of a Washington that's going to be any easier to govern after the election is over. I mean, I'd like for that to be wrong. I think we probably all would be. But, you know, you're looking at a situation now when you analyze the Comey bombshell of last week, in which, let's say it produces a Donald Trump turnaround and he wins the election. The Democrats will think it's because the FBI stepped in and did so unjustly at the last minute. They will basically be the ones who then will be saying the system was rigged and the election was unfair, and they will question the legitimacy of a Trump presidency. If it's the other way around and Hillary Clinton hangs on to win, which still seems like the most likely scenario, you already have Republicans in Congress just behind me saying they're immediately going to start doing further investigations of the Hillary Clinton emails, how they ended up on Anthony Weiner's laptop, what Huma Abedin knew, why the FBI didn't find those emails earlier. That's not an auspicious start to a new administration under any circumstances, and that's just the starting point. So I think you have a lot of anger in the campaign, a lot of divisiveness in the campaign that sure seems likely to spill over into governance after November 8th.
As you take a step back, though, Jerry, and look over, let's say, the past 8 years, we saw the Tea Party movement rise up 2009, 2010, wanting change in Washington, D.C. We've seen that Tea Party movement change, but we see some of the same themes addressed this time around. So as we take a look globally, it's what's happened, again, over the last 8 years. Where do you think we are right now as a country?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I think people want two things that are somewhat contradictory. They want change and they want Washington to work better. Now, maybe those two things go together, but I think what people are really frustrated by, and one of the reasons Donald Trump has some appeal, is that he says he'll change, but it also is because people say, I think he'll at least get something done. The problem is that if the expectation is that this election will produce an atmosphere in which things get done, that might not be so easy to realize, and you could have even greater frustration after the whole thing is over. I mean, just as another scenario, if Hillary Clinton wins the election, you have a lot of Republican senators who are fighting for their jobs and may keep their jobs by promising the voters that they will be a check on Hillary Clinton. So, in other words, their mandate will be to stop Hillary Clinton, not to cooperate with Hillary Clinton, if that's the scenario that emerges, and the same thing would be true the other way around. I think one of the things that might happen here and would change the scenarios is after November 8th, on November 9th, if everybody steps back and says, let's de-escalate the rhetoric a little bit, let's take some of the anger out of the system, let's take a deep breath and figure out how we can all do a little more of this together.
That would be nice. Some of the historians that we've talked to on this program have suggested that tension and debate is what the American system is all about. And we're seeing it at heightened levels, but ultimately, that's what makes us different and makes us unique. How do you take that into consideration? As I know you've talked to both Democrats and Republicans in your piece, and they all have weighed in on this issue.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, the politics is not beanbag, as they say, and it's made for healthy debate. I think one of the problems, though, is I think the debate has become uncivil, and I think that doesn't lend itself to sort of stopping the debate and then getting together in a room and figuring out what can we do, what is possible here, and that's, I think, the danger. And I think some of the anger in the electorate, and you saw it in both primary seasons, doesn't actually lend itself to the idea that voters will accept that there has to be some consensus or compromise reached from time to time in a democracy. So it's a balancing act. What it really requires is some leadership in Washington, and we'll see who emerges as somebody able to do that, able to provide that leadership after the election.
It'll be interesting. Until that time, we are dealing with hypothetics. Jerry, it's great to have you in the program as always. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Well, monthly insurance premiums for some Obamacare plans are expected to go up by an average of 25% next year, but that hasn't stopped people from signing up Open enrollment for 2017 began Tuesday, and officials say there's already a 50% increase in applications compared to the first day of enrollment last year. This as Obamacare becomes the main talking point for Donald Trump, the Republican nominee vowing to repeal and replace the health care law if he is elected. Garrett Tenney's live at the White House with more. Garrett?
Hi, Jenna. The White House is keeping a very close eye on these open enrollment numbers because they are crucial to the future of the Affordable Care Act. And after day one, the administration is feeling pretty good within the first 6 hours of open enrollment. Healthcare.gov received more than 60,000 applications, according to the Department of Health and Human Services. That's 50% more than the number of applications it received at the same point last year. What we don't know and what is key to turning around Obamacare, though, is how many of those applications are from young and healthy people rather than those who are older and sicker. It's no secret that dynamic has led to many of the Affordable Care Act's problems over the last 2.5 years. We've seen the cost of premiums go up, the number of health plan options go down, and major insurance companies leaving the Obamacare marketplace after losing billions of dollars. Last week, the White House announced premiums are expected to increase again this year on average of 25% across the country. And ever since then, it's become a hot topic on the campaign trail. Yesterday in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump repeated his vow to repeal and replace Obamacare. By the time this open enrollment period wraps up at the end of January, the administration estimates nearly 14 million people will have selected a plan. If that holds to be the case, it would be 1 million more than last year. Again, though, what's key is who those new signups are. Jenna?
Absolutely. The details on that, who and why they're coming to Obamacare is something we'll be looking at. Garrett, thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, analysts predict a record number of Americans will be taking to the skies this Thanksgiving. How airlines are preparing. Plus, yesterday on Happening Now, Joe Trippi said he thought Donald Trump focusing resources on Pennsylvania was a mistake, but now new polling shows Trump within striking distance there. Brand new polling out of Pennsylvania. Numbers hot off the presses in a survey conducted by Monmouth University. It shows Hillary Clinton leading in a four-way race, up 4 percentage points over Donald Trump. The latest Fox News scorecard has the state leaning Democratic while giving Clinton a total of 287 electoral votes, 17 more than she needs to win the White House. Let's dive deeper into some of these numbers with Trent Spiner of the New Hampshire Union Leader newspaper and John Frank, political reporter for the Denver Post. Welcome to both of you. There's another poll out, the CNN ORC poll, that has pretty much the same thing, a 4-point gap between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. John, to you first. Pennsylvania is one of those states that Donald Trump has said he can flip into the Republican column. Does it look possible at this point?
The polls certainly are showing a new dynamic in the race, and it's a similar story here in Colorado, where just a couple days ago, a poll put Trump within the margins of Hillary Clinton. So in both these states, Trump's going to have to do well. It looks like he could. We're seeing a lot of pressure on voters here in Colorado in terms of visits from candidates who are saying, turn in your ballots, get them in, let's close this Democratic advantage here. It's a similar story in Pennsylvania and a number of battleground states. Trump has got to make up room on the map.
Sticking with you for the moment, John, Hillary Clinton has also decided to start advertising again in Colorado, devoting some resources to a state she thought she had won.
The polling is one indication it's close, but the better indication is probably that Clinton's back on the air here in Colorado. She hasn't run local TV ads in Colorado since July, and now we're seeing Priorities USA, the super PAC that's favoring her campaign, also coming back into the state, as well as Michigan. So there's going to be a lot more attention on Colorado. We'll have Mike Pence in town today, and the Clinton campaign is stepping up their efforts, bringing former President Bill Clinton to town on Friday.
Trent, one of the issues this time around is enthusiasm among minority voters. Especially in the black community, there isn't the kind of enthusiasm for the Democratic ticket that there was when Barack Obama was running for president in 2008 and 2012.
That's right. And one of the most shocking things about both of these polls that actually just came out in the last hour is just how unfavorable both of these candidates are. Trump and Clinton are tied right around 53, 54% of people who say, look, I don't like either of these candidates, Democrats or Republicans. So that's going to be a significant challenge for them, not just among white voters, but minority voters, too. And the Republican Party said after 2012, look, we need to expand the tent. We need to make sure that minorities are part of the Republican Party. And that effort has largely not happened in this cycle. So it's going to be a challenge for both campaigns.
And what's it looking like in New Hampshire right now, Trent?
Well, in New Hampshire, there's some breaking news. Donald Trump says he's coming back both Friday and Monday night, right before the elections. He's going to have one of his final parties here Monday night in New Hampshire. So I think that what we'll see is it's going to be very tight. I think that Trump really does believe that he can win New Hampshire, even though some of the polls say that maybe he is behind. But the one thing you need to consider is that this year we've seen almost 200 polls in New Hampshire. So I think you need to really take these with a grain of salt. A lot of the polls are skewed towards Democrats. So I think that it's still a tight race here.
He likes New Hampshire. Gave him a big win in the primary.
Yes, he does.
So we'll see. Trent Spiner, John Frank, thank you both.
With the FBI's controversial announcement that is looking into another batch of Clinton emails came news that the agency has been investigating the Clinton Foundation. That's from a Wall Street Journal report. The Justice Department reportedly insisted there wasn't enough evidence to move forward. But the National Review has a piece out today entitled "The Clinton Emails Are Critical to the Clinton Foundation Investigation." In that piece, Andrew McCarthy writes this, quote, "The manner in which the State Department was put in the service of the foundation during Hillary Clinton's tenure as secretary is shocking. It is suggestive of a pattern of pay-to-play bribery, the monetizing of political influence, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The Justice Department should be investigating as a possible RICO conspiracy under the federal anti-racketeering laws." I'm joined now by Fox News anchor and lawyer Greg Jarrett. It's quite a piece in the National Review.
It really is. It's worth reading.
It goes through a lot of different connections. Just start us out. What does RICO mean? What is he talking about?
Racketeering, influence, corruption. It's basically using or creating an organization for criminal purposes. In this particular case, the argument's being made by National Review that Hillary Clinton was actually using her foundation for a dual purpose, a front, on the one hand doing good charitable work, but on the other hand funneling money from donors into the foundation in exchange for benefits by virtue of her position as Secretary of State.
Why could the newly found emails be relevant to an investigation that was ongoing, maybe isn't anymore, into the Clinton Foundation?
Because there's an intersection of the private email server and classified documents and the foundation. Hillary Clinton was not only using the unauthorized private server for State Department business and thousands of classified documents on it, but also some of the communications with the foundation were run through that private email server. So investigators who have spent reportedly more than a year looking into the foundation are eager to get their hands on some of these devices newly discovered to determine whether there's any evidence not just of classified information, but illegal use of the foundation.
Now, does intent matter in that case in relation to the Clinton Foundation? So Secretary Clinton finds herself Secretary of State. She had this foundation for a while. Yes, there are some intersections, but there was never an intent for those, those to intersect. So what does that matter?
Let me give you an example. If it is true that Hillary Clinton helped UBS, the bank, avoid the IRS, and in return, her husband received $1.5 million, and her foundation suddenly gets a tenfold increase from UBS to their charity. Is that an exchange of benefits by virtue of her position? If it isn't, if it can be proven, that would be corrupt under the statute.
So that's one of the reasons why these emails, as you point out, could be related to the foundation investigation. Now, the Clinton camp will say, well, wait a minute. If the Clinton Foundation was under investigation by the Justice Department, no one's mentioning that Paul Manafort, who was part of the Trump campaign, was also under investigation by the Justice Department. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the FBI is not confirming or denying that there is an investigation into two things. Whether Trump's campaign was communicating with Russia and the government in their hacking campaign, which U.S. intelligence agencies confirm that Russia was behind it. And the second thing they're looking into is the former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. He had dealings with the pro-Russian Ukraine government. He received apparently $12.7 million at one point in time. They're looking to see whether he violated any laws, failing to report his income or failing to register as an agent. Now, I mean, it does seem on its face, well, you're talking about the Hillary Clinton renewed investigation. Why aren't you talking about that? There's a difference. Comey felt duty-bound to correct the record, his sworn testimony before Congress in which he said the Hillary investigation is closed. That doesn't apply to the Manafort and Trump campaign investigations. There is no record under oath to correct.
Interesting. Okay, a lot to think about there. I think that one of the big takeaways when you look at these stories is that this is just a total mess. All of this is a mess, and one wonders how the public gets fair representation to know if any wrongdoing has been done. When does a special prosecutor come in? Would that be the best for us, for the public, Greg?
It absolutely would. It does look like Loretta Lynch has been compromised all along. There are questions about Comey. So the president can go to the Court of Appeals, ask for the appointment of a special prosecutor. Is he going to do that? I doubt it. Instead, Congress can reauthorize the independent counsel statute. You and I talked about this before. And in that case, they can appoint the equivalent of a special prosecutor to be independent and authorized to look into this. I think the American public would have more confidence in that than a very compromised Loretta Lynch.
But just a quick question. Does that mean that special prosecutor has to start all over with these investigations, start from scratch?
Not necessarily. He could utilize the investigation that has been conducted by the FBI into both the classified emails and the Hillary Clinton Charity Foundation.
Interesting. We'll watch for that. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
John?
Well, Ohio is considered a must-win state for Donald Trump, but according to election officials, there are some precincts that may not yield a single vote for the GOP nominee. Peter Ducey reporting live from Cleveland with that. Peter?
And, John, something very unexpected is happening here in Cuyahoga County, always a bellwether. The early ballot requests from Democrats have dropped 35% since 2012, while the early ballot requests from Republicans are actually up 3%. And those numbers are especially remarkable because this is a county where in the past, multiple polling places had reported 0 votes for the Republican ticket, something that election officials still expect to happen again next week.
There were multiple precincts that had 0 ballots for the Republican candidate. So I suspect that that will be close to the same in this presidential election. Maybe there will be a few here and there, but I expect that, we will still have 0 precincts in the urban areas of the county that will not cast a vote for the Republican candidate.
Experts say that even though a big 0 next to the Republican candidate's name looks suspicious, it's just a result of changing demographics and not voter fraud. And many volunteers rooting for the Republican ticket this time are just going to have to take those experts' word for it because the independent poll watchers Trump is asking to keep an eye on things at their local ballot box aren't going to be allowed to go anywhere near the voters in this county.
You just can't walk into a polling place and say, I'm here on behalf of Donald Trump to monitor the polls. So I think people are concerned that there's going to be violence, that there's going to be intimidation at the polls, particularly from some of the comments that Donald Trump made. Ohio is also an open carry state, so just like there was during the Republican National Convention here in Cleveland, it's possible that people could just come with their firearms and just walk outside of polling places, which could somehow be intimidating to people.
But officials told us that after a few weeks of early in-person voting, there have been no credible reports of voter fraud yet. John.
All right, Peter Ducey reporting live from Ohio. Thanks, Peter.
Some new information on Thanksgiving travel. The industry trade group Airlines for America predicting a record 27.3 million Americans will be flying this year between November 18th and the 29th. And that's a 2.5% increase from last year. But despite all those passengers, the group says there should be plenty of seats. Remember that as you're looking for them as airlines continue to try to increase capacity.
Democrat and Republican lawmakers both keeping a close eye on the down ballot races. The fight for the Senate remains incredibly close heading into Election Day, but analysts now say it is unlikely that Democrats can flip the House. The Cook Political Report headline reads, quote, House GOP majority looks assured, but margin in doubt. Let's talk about these down ballot races with Marianne Marsh, former senior advisor to then Senator John Kerry. Noel Nickpour is a Republican strategist and former Republican congressional candidate in Florida's 18th district. Marianne, do you agree that Democrats are not very likely to be able to pick up control of the House?
No, the House they're not. But remember, the closer that the Democrats come to 20 seats, the more likely it is that if Hillary Clinton wins, that's the scenario it would happen, then it's going to make it easier for her to govern and get the Republicans to cooperate. I do think the Democrats win the Senate in this election. But if the Democrats can then pick up 15, 20 seats, anywhere in there, it makes it much tougher for the Republicans to not cooperate with Hillary Clinton, not cooperate with the Democratic Senate. They have to then try to negotiate, and that's exactly what voters want. They want to see Washington work, and the closer you get to 20 seats for the Democrats, the more likely that is to happen.
Noel, you ran as a Republican for a congressional seat. What do you think the Republicans' chances are? Are they going to lose seats? Are they going to retain control of the House of Representatives?
I actually think that the Republicans are going to maintain control of the Senate because a lot, the difference has been in the Republican Party between Trump and the establishment. Now, all those establishment voters, a lot of them have said that they're going to vote. They just may not vote for Trump, but they are going to protect their U.S. Senate seats. So I do see them getting out in large numbers and making sure that they vote and maintain control of the Senate. It's very important. One of the things that is very interesting is that the Koch brothers have released a new entourage of ads, and we are starting to see some of the polls that where Democrats were slightly ahead. It's starting to measure up, and it's starting to go neck and neck in some of these swing states that looked like it wouldn't be a good outcome for Republicans. It's starting to change.
Yesterday on Happening Now, I spoke with Karl Rove. He said that he thought that Friday's news from the FBI on the Clinton email situation could be a game changer when it comes to those down ballot races. Listen.
And it's going to have down ballot effects. Indiana and Missouri, where he's already ahead, those states, I think, are going to, his margin is going to improve in those states, which helps the Republican Senate candidates in those states. And similarly in North Carolina and Nevada, where he's slightly behind, I think his position is going to strengthen, and that's going to help the down ballot candidates as well.
He, of course, referring to Donald Trump in that situation. Marianne, what do you think about that?
Well, I disagree with Karl on this. I mean, yes, the Comey news on Friday wasn't helpful in that respect to Hillary Clinton. But what I think you see now is she's on offense in all these states, Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Those are states that Donald Trump absolutely, positively has to win some combination of all of them to get to the White House. She's campaigning hard in all of them, pouring more money in them, because the bigger her margin in those states are, not only does it lock the door on Donald Trump, it is more likely to bring up those Senate races and House races. So the better she does in these states, and you saw that before last week, the bigger her margin, you saw the Senate races come with her and come across that. So Patrick Murphy coming within shouting distance of Rubio. You have Katie McGinty over Toomey now in Pennsylvania. You see Maggie Hassan over Ayotte in New Hampshire. Those races come up with Clinton, and the better Clinton does, the better those Senate races do, which is why I think the Democrats are going to take the Senate back. I know Karl's working on those races hard, trying to get the Republicans to win them at the last minute, but I don't think it's going to happen.
All that being said, Noel, the excitement level among Clinton voters has taken a pretty significant dive since the email revelations of Friday. And if people aren't excited to vote for the Democratic candidate, that may affect the Democratic races down ballot.
Of course, you're exactly right. And the key word is passion. And that's where Donald Trump may have a significant number in pulling these people to the polls. And another thing you've got to look at is Hillary's weak spot. And the reason she is forced to spend a lot more money right now defending her reputation is her track record on honesty and not being forthcoming. And right now, with the Comey letter on Friday, that is in front and center, and it's got a lot of people very concerned. And I think what's going to happen is when you see these races, when you get 2 points, 3 points, 1 point, that is basically too close to call. And we are not going to really know until it gets down to the wire on this.
It's down to the wire.
John, one last point.
Real quickly, Marianne.
Real quick. I mean, so this is where having a great ground game makes all the difference in the world, and the Clinton folks have that. That's worth 3 to 5 points that wins any of these states right now.
That is where she is said to have the advantage. But, you know, strange things have happened already this election season.
We'll see Tuesday.
Marianne Marsh, Noel Nickpour, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Well, brand new developments in a lawsuit linked to the election. What a federal judge is demanding the Republican National Committee do today by 5 p.m. We're live with that story next. Well, a new deadline in a lawsuit linked to the election, where Republican poll-watching efforts are under fire as Democrats sue to stop it. Now, a federal judge just told the Republican National Committee to produce any evidence by 5 p.m. today that shows it is not secretly working with Donald Trump's campaign. Our senior correspondent, Eric Shawn, explains all of this. Eric?
Yeah, hi, Jenna. Well, the election has landed in federal court in Newark, New Jersey. That's where the Democrats are suing the RNC, claiming it is working with the Trump campaign. If so, that would possibly be a violation of a decades-old consent decree prohibiting the RNC from deploying so-called ballot security operations at the polls. The RNC has denied